the things he was saying just really didn't make sense, because the whole rationale for the deal was to create a vertically integrated business. To have, so basically you combine the telecom business with the content business, and by putting those two things together, you get this big advantage.
And there's some virtuous circle of advertising and network effect.
Well,
and all that sort of
that
thing.
was hard to understand, and it's never very good when it's hard to understand the benefits of a deal. When you have to think about it, how do they do this? That's not a good sign. But the bigger thing, which is about vertical integration, just didn't make sense. The reason it didn't make sense is because this is what telcos were doing in the early 2000s.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. Weather's a bit shit today, isn't it?
Bloody
Which is a
awful.
shame, because we've booked a bit of space after in a place that's
Outdoors.
outside.
It has got burners though.
It's got burners and a roof,
Yeah.
but it's still outdoors.
We might get blown away.
It's called Flatiron Square, by the way. We can say that because not a lot of people are going to turn up because this comes out on
You
Monday.
never know. Well, yeah, that's true.
But it's nice
live.
It's nice to stand in Southwark. Yeah, like people would. Like we've got groupies.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Oh my God, that's actually Scott
It's
and
those
Ian.
guys from the podcast.
But we'll make a go of it. What else is going on? Just one thing. Actually, so we're going to make it short and sweet because we got the booking. I booked it about a month ago when it was impossible to get anything. When we got the last phase of the D lockdown, and unlike last summer where I went out, I remember going out and hitching. There was no one out.
Yeah.
It's like people were still shitting themselves a bit, or they were worried that there was going to be a riot while everyone just sort of got it out of their system. Anyway, whatever it was.
But the indoors, the pubs are not as busy this week as I'd expected them to be from having gone into a couple.
No, the train was a bit busier coming in.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think people are happy to be outdoors.
Right, and
but
just out and about.
I'm still not convinced that a lot of people are that happy to be inside a pub without a face mask on.
Yeah, and yet where we were at White Hart, everyone was in there just getting on with it, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was quiet inside, wasn't it?
Yes, fair enough.
Very quiet compared to a
Yeah,
normal
I
Friday.
don't know. I was just reading something in The Spectator on the way down, Lionel Shriver just talking about the utter mask mania.
Mm-hmm.
And she just said it's basically, as far as she's concerned, it's gotten to the level of superstition.
Yeah.
No one really thinks they do anything.
It's like burning
just like
witches.
touching wood. or
According
something.
to the CDC, once we're fully vaccinated, we shouldn't need to.
Yeah. And also, according to various other data points, even if you've got it on, you've got like about 10% protection anyway.
Yeah, I think
'Cause it's all
if
coming
someone
out the
coughs,
sides
isn't
and
it?
stuff. Yeah.
That's the only difference
It's
it
like
makes.
a direct sort of projection of water droplets.
Yeah, if you're on a
then there's
bus
certainly protection
and
there.
nobody coughs on the journey, it wouldn't make any difference if no
No,
one's
but
wearing
they'd have to
one or
cough
not.
sitting opposite you.
Yeah.
If they coughed at the back of the bus, virus isn't going to
No.
commute. Isn't going to get Google Maps out to find Ian's gob. It's just going to get.
Yeah.
And if it happens
Well,
to go
the
somewhere-
crazy thing is wearing them outdoors, to be honest with you, not indoors,
know,
which some
people are doing
countries still
that.
insist on you doing. I find that really balmy because it
And
doesn't
you-
sound healthy at all to me. But
And you're still getting people jumping out the way on the pavement, like when I walk the dog.
Mm-hmm.
People will walk in the road.
yeah,
Nothing's going to happen, mate.
yeah.
Nothing is going to happen. And you're
They'd rather,
probably been
they'd rather
vaccinated.
walk down the middle of the M1 than past you. Yeah.
I know, they fancy their chances. Anyway, the only other thing I want to say, I've heard through the grapevine that some people are a bit put off by the fact that we drink beer on the podcast. So we had that guy that Pierre told us about
That's the
moaning
whole point
about
of
the swearing.
doing it.
I think that this started with the pandemic, actually. We used to not do this, actually. Right?
The
No.
beer drinking has become a pandemic era thing.
It's become a regular thing. But we had one like before Informer had bought Light Reading,
But it wasn't every...
where we had Mary Clark on and we
the
did a
Christmas
double
one.
episode and we just fucking went for it. We had wine and shit going on. Anyway, so I just want to say to those people, if you're watching, cheers.
Just having a sip.
You know you love it, really. So there we go. Okay, let's crack on. It's still a bit quiet, isn't it, news-wise? So this
Yeah, it is
week,
quiet.
I think we're going to start off. There was the GSMA, which runs the Mobile Congress, and it's due to start in like a month, isn't it?
God, yeah, just over a month.
I know. And they did a press conference, and the sort of self-interested news gathering part of us thought, oh, maybe they're going to cancel because that's a nice juicy story to write. But that's not what happened, and so spoiler alert. That's kind of ruined it. You don't need to bother listening now. But we're going to talk about what did happen and analyse that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, we've spoken about it recently, but we finally got AT&T effectively throwing in the towel on its massive content acquisition with Warner, with Time Warner. And you've written an analysis piece on that, which I haven't read.
It's sort of analysis, a bit of a gobby piece, really.
A bit of a gobby piece. Well, I knew you were writing it.
Yeah.
But I haven't read the final piece, so you can tell us about that, and I can tell you whether I think you're full of shit or not. And then lastly, we're going to just talk about, there's been a couple of, not so much quarterlies, but like capital market days, sort of analyst telling investors what to expect from operators like Deutsche Telekom and Vodafone.
Yeah.
And we're going to reflect on what that says about
Yeah.
the sort of tone of the business at the moment. So let's crack straight on. Pierre, you haven't got any little people who've been listening in Antarctica or anything like that?
No, it's next week.
Next week we'll have a little recap.
So far, Denver is in the lead.
Is it?
Denver's often quite high up there, though, isn't it?
No, thanks, Denver. It's because they're all stoned.
Isn't Dish based in Denver? Dish Network. The headquarters is in Denver, I think.
No, there isn't Liberty Media. Haven't they got
Possibly.
Colorado?
There are a few tech firms
There's a
around
bit of that
Denver,
going on. Well, I think it's just because ganja's legal, and so they're just sitting there, and they're just like, we might as well watch this podcast. They probably don't even have any
they don't even
interest
care about the drinking. They're thinking, why aren't these guys doing hard drugs?
Why aren't these guys rolling up a fat doobie? Because it's still illegal here, Colorado. Have a word. We have to go to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
I've ever told you about when I went to Amsterdam with my mate to try and recreate that, and we miscalculated and spent 4 hours walking around Amsterdam silently, trying to walk it off. Anyway,
You know, now that Brexit happened, that might change.
Yeah,
It'd be a good way for the UK to get some tax money.
basically it's a bit like drinking. If you're out of practice, you need to start at like entry level. And we went to this place in Amsterdam that had like people in lab suits on. We'll have some of that pro stuff. And then we had a couple of tokes and we were just monged, and it was just game over for about 4 hours. Anyway, you live and learn. So, yeah, Mobile Congress. So GSMA had this press event, and they only really announced it with about 48 hours notice, didn't they?
Yeah, it was short notice, which is why I thought when they announced it, maybe there's going to be some dramatic news, because there have been quite a few more withdrawals in the last 2 weeks, which I've not.
Have there? Oh, I sort of downplayed that. Like who?
I think Samsung, Qualcomm, I think, was one of them. Yeah.
I took a screenshot of the slide that they put up in their presentation.
Right.
Because I thought for a sec I couldn't spot Huawei. And that was going to be my story.
Oh, they actually had a slide with naming exhibitors that were going, did they?
Yeah, with all their logos.
Right.
I missed
that one.
I was going to share it with you, but then when I saw that Huawei was on it, I thought, well, there's nothing to say here then. But yeah, I didn't know about Samsung.
Well, I just figured with there's been a handful in the last 2 weeks and a couple of big ones, and I thought maybe with that, and also, you know, some of the news about travel's been not great, hasn't it? I mean, from the UK, I imagine there's quite a lot of people who go to Mobile World Congress. You know, it's a big country.
Oh yeah, whenever you're on that EasyJet flight from Luton,
yeah, we're a big country for technology and telecom, and
it's always rammed.
And we're
I always
near,
like bump into
Spain. Yeah,
and stuff.
so I imagine they have quite a lot of people travelling from the UK, and yet the UK rules for going over there at the moment are pretty onerous in that you come back and you have to go into quarantine for 2 weeks, which I'm sure is going to put not everybody off, but it'll put quite a few people off. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to quarantine in early July for 2 weeks after.
Do you know what I mean? And that's proper quarantine. That's not just like keep your head down.
Yeah. So I thought that maybe they were going to say, you know, dramatically that unfortunately we decided to just make it completely virtual, but they didn't.
I didn't expect it. I wouldn't have been that surprised if it had happened. And like I said, the self-interested, salacious journalist in me was sort of hoping it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't hoping it would happen full stop.
Yeah.
I was just hoping it would happen in terms of me doing my job that day.
Yeah.
Which just sort of helps people to explain why sometimes us journalists take the piss so much. You know, we're just trying to pay the bills.
Yeah.
We're just following orders. So it wasn't that. And you know, I don't want to be unkind to them because I'm on MWC's side. It's a really important event. It's a really important event commercially for organisations like Reading and Telecoms.com, under normal circumstances, we're bringing a ton of revenue from stuff around it, from doing video interviews there, from doing all the stuff. I remember Ray used to always have to just go and spend the whole of the Sunday with Huawei doing stuff at their little booth or whatever. It's an enormous source of commercial activity, and it's obviously also an enormous source of networking and social activity. And it's the highlight, it's the undeniable highlight of the telecoms industry calendar under normal circumstances. So there's no question that I'd rather it worked. But having said that, just GSMA as an organisation, I'm never quite sure what I think about them. They're a trade association, but they seem to bring in a lot of wedge, primarily from Mobile World Congress. And I know from looking at publicly available accounts from a few years ago, there's some people there, some of whom we're going to mention, who are doing all right. They're not short of a bob. So as soon as a company becomes for profit, then your sort of sympathies oscillate a little bit. If it was like a purely charitable, or if they were transparent and every single bit of revenue they get goes into, and they'll say they're non-profit. And non-profits are non-profit, except for the senior execs, who seem to do quite nicely.
I don't sort of resent them in that way, but I think there is a bit of schadenfreude about what's going on, because a lot of people have been quite resentful for years, I think, that so much revenue's been sucked that way. And, organisations...
It's pricey to go to Mobile Congress.
Well, there used to be... It didn't used to be something that was run by the GSMA, did it, Mobile World Congress? And it used to have...
There used to be another company not too far from us.
Exactly. And there used to be other companies, but it wasn't just a company not too far from us. There were other people very much involved in the mix, doing TV and stuff like that for them. And then everything basically got it in-house.
It's too much of an earner.
And, and it's grown so much and taken, I think, sucked everything into it and taken away a lot of momentum at other events. Now, maybe it's a good thing to have.
It's like the trade show equivalent of like Google and Amazon.
Yeah, well, it is in a way. And I think it's a good thing to actually have one big trade event, in the way that oil has a big sort of event each year. And it's good to have a big sort of
oil fest.
Something like that. But it's good to have one big show that I think draws attention and focuses the world's attention on the industry, and it's a place where, big executives can meet and all this sort of thing. But they've not been that popular, I know, with some exhibitors that you talk to, simply because they're sort of perceived to be quite money grabbing about it all. And it's been quite, it's something that people, I think, feel quite resentful about, that they have to go to this thing and be seen there because there's not anywhere else really that you go to, and yet
they're
you
treated
get
like a
charged
captive
a lot of money.
market.
And I don't think that side of it's good. But I don't wish them. I mean, I'm like you. I think I can understand why they want to put it on, and I think I don't think it's irresponsible to be putting it on now. Actually,
no,
I think I think we've reached a point where we need to start thinking we get on with it. We either variants are going to be with us forever, and this disease is going to be with us forever. The only places that seem to think it's not going to be with us forever are Australia and New Zealand.
And they're in the middle of nowhere. They can put up walls.
If they want to shut themselves off from the rest of the planet, then that's up to them. But the rest of us are going to have to live with this disease. It's too late to just kind of eradicate it. And there's always going to be a variant, because that's what happens. So at some point, people have got to make the decision: do we carry on worrying about this sort of thing and not having free movement and not sending people to shows like this, or do we accept a greater tolerance of risk? And vaccines are supposed to do that. So maybe I'm being a bit unfair. The rollout's not gone great in some countries this year, partly because the European Union cocked up its procurement so much. And maybe next year will be better. But I think that, to me, the GSMA's got two worries. One is short term, which is what happens this year. And there was a bit of desperation, I think, on stage by John Hoffman and Mats Granryd that
they're like the CEO and
the Director General, I think he's called.
What's the difference?
I don't know, but they're obviously concerned about having any number at all really this year. I mean, I think they're originally sort of talking about 50,000. Now the bottom end estimate's 30,000, but. I think some people would be surprised if it's even that high, actually, because it's not that people necessarily don't want to go. It's just so hard to go. And do you want to go and, do you want to wear a mask all the time in 30-degree heat, even when you're outdoors? Do you want to have to be tested every day almost? Do you want to have to go into quarantine 2 weeks afterwards? And are you going to go if the big exhibitors aren't there?
The Spanish Guardia Civil I've got no problem getting in your face.
Exactly. So
They love a bit of hassle.
and then it's companies themselves. It might not even be employees or attendees who might want to go. If their boss says, "Look, we're not sending people this year," then they don't really have a choice in the matter. So I think the short-term worry for the Mobile World Congress is what happens this year. The bigger worry for me is what happens to it in the next few years, because I sense from talking to a few people behind the scenes, and people who do exhibit there, that. And this gets into this whole issue of the new normal and people not working in offices anymore and all this kind of thing, and more stuff happening on Zoom. And I'm not saying this will happen, but there's a chance that people just start to think, is it worth spending huge amounts of money at these trade shows? I mean, the irony of all this is that the GSMA's made it more virtual this year than ever. Yeah, everything's online. You can watch all the conference presentations online. You can probably participate in press conferences online. You can arrange a meeting with someone online. And I'm sure a lot of people there who work in sort of accounts departments and look at the kind of expenses that are coming through to them in February normally and what impact that's going to have on the bottom line are thinking, hang on a minute, we didn't really do so badly last year. Ericsson's profits were up 60% last year.
Without attending Mobile Congress.
And it didn't mention not going to Mobile World Congress as being a big disruptive factor once in its financial reports.
Yeah.
So do those people start to think...
Is the whole thing being reframed as a less important thing?
Yeah, is it necessary to go? Actually, look, operators need to buy core network software and base stations, whether or not they can shake hands with their suppliers.
Yeah, and get pissed with them. And therefore, although we all like going there because we like the networking side of it, I'm just wondering with the people at the top... Do you think this pandemic has marked the end of the jolly?
Well, it might do, because I just think
That's
people...
depressing, isn't it?
We convinced ourselves that these things were necessary to build relationships. And this is this desperation that came through for me in the press conference. Max Granwer was there saying, you can't do this online. You have to build relationships in person and you have to meet up. Well, yeah, we all like to think that, don't we? But the fact is that what last year proved was business gets done anyway. It gets done anyway. People buy software, they do deals just because they can't meet up.
It is a tough one. And so I would say, and I'm not just saying this because some people I report into at Informa might watch this podcast and go, all right, guys, don't be dissing events too much. That, the old business do business with people thing does apply. People do want to meet up. Some people do want to go and get pissed in the evening. And it does completely reframe the relationship you have with someone if you have just even one beer with them, let alone have a proper night out.
Yeah.
So I do honestly think that there is going to be enduring demand for physical events, but I agree with you that
there might be,
these sorts of things force a sort of recalibration and a reassessment of how imperative they are.
Yeah, because I think that, look, the sales guys themselves, right, knowing what salespeople are like anyway, probably like the networking side of it, which involves going out, whining and dying clients. It's a very nice city to be in.
It's all on expenses anyway.
Yeah, but, the problem is that the people who are in charge, who are sort of booking profits and reporting at the end of the month, and then the shareholders who are seeing what's going on are going to say to themselves, well, hang on a minute, we did just as well. And yeah, okay, you have a beer with someone and you form a better relationship with them, but maybe it's not a relationship that a network deal should be based on. Yeah, maybe you should be measuring those sorts of things on criteria that aren't about getting on with someone really well, but actually about how good the company's equipment is.
How many pints they can down.
Not on the fact that I really like John from Nokia. Yeah. He's a good laugh and he sells software, and actually,
and we're out
to be honest,
5 in the morning.
Ericsson stuff's a bit better, but I'm going to buy from John because I get on with him more. Maybe it should be based on
any
more
salespeople
objective
listen to this are going to be going, Ian, shut the fuck up.
Well, I'm just giving my honest opinion. I'm not saying this is necessarily going to happen. I'm just saying that's the situation, I think, and it's not just GSMA. It's actually any events companies face this issue outside telecom as well. But it's a big issue for the GSMA simply because it's got this mega event that I personally, my view is that I think it's much easier for smaller events, more local events in future to be to thrive.
We're not getting sacked by Informa. No, we're saying that.
I think there's going to be more of a role for those than these monster things where you fly in thousands of people from China, and thousands of people from the US, thousands of people from other bits of Europe, and put them all in this mosh pit for a couple of weeks and get them completely ratted and then see what happens.
God, I'm just thinking about that normal World Congress when you're up on that elevated bit where you go along to get from one hall to another. It's just rammed. You're lucky not to bump into people.
I know.
Anyway,
well, I don't think it'll be like that this year somehow, Scott.
Somehow. Well, there we are. So it gets us back to the event. So a few criticisms. Having said all these caveats about how fair play, we like Mobile World Congress and all that sort of thing. The thing started 10 minutes late, which is a bit shit.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a public-facing thing. I don't know if they really understand why that's a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
You and I were IMing each other, and the problem is, we're not necessarily rational as journalists. And if we're writing something, we're probably turning it around in an hour or two. And there's a lot of gut feel in it, especially when you're trying to create if you're trying to be a proper writer, rather than just rearranging the words in the press release, you've got to inject your own narrative into it. Yeah. And so if you put people against you by making them wait for 10 minutes, then they're immediately like, right, well, I'm now worse, not so well disposed to you as I was 10 minutes earlier. So that was a mistake. And then there was this sort of double act with the two head honchos, and it wasn't that convincing. There was. It wasn't terrible. It was just a bit cheesy.
It was a bit cheesy and it was a little bit desperate, and some of the things they've announced like this, if you're a sort of local Spanish company outside Telecom and you're in these 11 sectors, then you can now pick up a ticket for €21. And
was it just for Spanish companies?
Yeah,
oh, then I didn't report that properly. I thought it was just people in general.
Yeah.
I thought it was a general offer.
So what they're trying to do is make up the sort of international deficit that they're expecting with companies from Spain. But because obviously the Spanish telecom companies are going to go anyway because they're there. They're now saying, well, there's a lot of adjacent sectors that might be interested in telecom, so let's make. Yeah, and they're not going to pay €700 for a ticket anyway.
No, that's what thing that we're because obviously we never pay to 21. Go because we get a press pass.
Yeah, but they might pay
€700 just to turn up and walk around and collect pens.
Well, if you work
that's
for
a lot of pens, man.
If you work for a Spanish automaker, you can get there for €21 now.
Well, quite. You can get, and even some of that gets given to Spanish sort of COVID relief.
If they hit their target.
If they hit,
I think it was contingent on them hitting their target.
I didn't get that caveat either.
Well, they might.
You're clearly paying closer
having
attention
announced that they're going to do it, I suspect they might just do that anyway because it's not a massive amount, is it? It was only. It wasn't like a multi-million.
I think they should just offer. I think they call them Discovery Pass. Yeah. I think they should offer them free to everyone.
I hear the GSMA is going to give a free iPhone to anybody who shows up.
Right.
No. Disclaimer.
They might as well. That's about how much a fucking Discovery Pass costs, man. And that's before you get into like VIP stuff. Yeah, that really struck me. I know it costs a lot to exhibit, but I had never really thought about what it costs just to turn up.
Yeah,
€700.
700, yeah.
Damn.
I know it's
a lot of money. I think they should just offer that for free to everyone, because even if they, even if Huawei turns up and they mentioned Danielle Royce, didn't they? Even if she's sitting there playing tennis with fucking AWS or whatever. If no one's there,
why do you need to turn up if it's the cloud? Can't you just arrange it through the public cloud?
Yeah, that's a good point. Meow. So yes, I agree. It came over a bit desperate. They kept going, "Oh, come along, it's going to be really great, and we'll give you these little discounts, and this will be cool, and that'll be cool." And you just thought, why are they having a press event just to say it's going to be great if they're not worried about how many people are going to turn up?
Yeah.
And they should be worried about how many people are going to turn up.
Do they do this sort of thing anyway?
Well, I think they do. I think I chatted to someone within GSMA afterwards, and they told me that this is because I'd gone, why are they having this press event?
Yeah.
And they read my story and went, well, they normally do, but it's quite Spanish media focused.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, and this is just a normal Spanish media thing, then my only criticism is, given that they were inviting international media, it felt like they'd put on a special press event to announce something special. And then when all it was, yeah, please come, it's going to be great, then I think we're entitled to go, they're sounding a bit desperate.
It did sound a bit desperate. And I have, I have sympathy for the situation they're in. It's not easy. And, I think people are being, personally, my personal view is that people are being almost too cautious, I think, at the moment. In a country like
I would
Spain,
definitely
where
go.
it's
People have come up to me from listening to the pod going, "So Scott, you're going then, are you?" And I was going, "Well, it looks like it." But then we were chatting earlier on this week about this amber bullshit we've got going on in the UK. So we've got this thing they call a traffic light system, which I find so patronising. It's like, oh yeah, I understand traffic lights because they're on the road and they've got different colours. And in this country, for some reason, we can't say yellow either.
Yeah.
We've got to say amber.
Well, the thing that annoys me about these silly traffic light systems is they clearly don't work anyway.
Well,
the one country that we should be worried about at the moment, it seems, is India. And
they're red. But it took them a while to make them red.
But it took them a while, and it obviously didn't make any difference because it's now spreading throughout the UK, this Indian variant. I mean, I personally
Bolton
don't think it's...
Don't go to B places.
I suspect it's not something to be too worried about because it seems like the vaccines work against it.
I haven't been worried since the pandemic started.
No,
I might get a bit of a flu and I'll be in bed for a couple of days, which frankly is what happened when I had the vaccine anyway.
The problem is that, it's getting slightly off topic, but variants are going to happen all the time. Every year there's going to be new variants.
That can't be the thing.
You can't justify having permanent lockdowns and restrictions on the basis that new variants are coming along when we've already got a vaccine program. Because even if you tweak the vaccines and you get them adapted so that they're more effective against new variants, people won't have had them immediately. It's still then going to be another few months before everybody gets it.
And people are suddenly going, oh, did you know that viruses mutate? Yeah, well done, mate.
I think it's just the media. I think the government bases the lockdowns on hospitals,
which is like a self-perpetuating feedback loop, because the media probably gets its stuff from government and Sage and all that. Anyway, all right, I'm going to wrap it up there because we're going to make this one a bit more disciplined when it comes to time. My feeling is we've got this amber system in the UK whereby if we go to Spain, when we come back, we've got to be in quarantine for 10 days. Yeah. Or is it 2 weeks? I don't know.
10 days. Yeah.
10 days. And I'm just thinking, I don't really fancy that.
Not after being cooped up for so long as it is.
And I'd be happy to go to World Congress. I'd be happy to report on it. I'd be happy to see what this unique, weird.
The trouble is, it's not just you that has to quarantine, is it? It's your family, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, and then there's just so much faff, and we've got to get tests, and we've got to do this and that and the other. Yeah, just the one thing. I heard someone talking about the farce of it all. When you go into, let's say, Heathrow, and they basically bottleneck everyone at the passport control bit.
Yeah.
There's no filtering there.
No, of course not.
Depending on where you come from.
No.
So it's just fucking absurd.
It is madness, yeah.
Anyway, all right. Let's stop that one there. But, good luck. I hope it's still all right. But from that press event, I'd be surprised if even 30k people turned up. 30k though, times €700, that's still a decent amount of cash.
30k would be, just to finish off, if they get 30k, then, good on them, basically. That's a good number, I think, in the situation.
When everything's going well, they're more like 100k, isn't it?
It's normally about 100, a little bit more than that, I think. Right. So 30k is a lot. Almost 1 in 3 people have gone that normally go. That's good. That'll be a good result.
I wish them all the luck in the world, but to be honest, as long as this amber bullshit's going on, I'm not so sure for myself. Okay. Content. So we spoke about this a pod or two ago. Telecoms companies buying into content. So Verizon bought 90s internet brands, and then that turned out to be bollocks. Who knew?
Yeah.
BT got into BT Sport, and there's reports they're thinking of getting out of it. Yeah, I've spoken to some people where it's like, well, hold your horses. We might be thinking of it, but nothing's set in stone. Yeah. And I think we might have spoken about the speculation that AT&T was going to get out of it, and then that officially happened at the start of this week. They're basically hiving off WarnerMedia, which is their content-y stuff that they got when they bought Time Warner.
Yeah.
Which was a massive...
WarnerMedia is just a renamed Time Warner.
Pretty much, yeah. It's the Time Warner bit within AT&T. Yeah. And so what did they spend? 50 billion, 100 billion?
Well, I think it was more than that. I think the purchase price was 85 billion, but I think it implied a higher enterprise value for Time Warner. Yeah.
Right. So let's say 90 billion for the sake of argument.
I think it's more like 100.
All right, 100, okay. And now it's such a big deal, and obviously it took ages to go through because the regulatory people have got to have a proper butchers at it.
Yeah.
And then after 5 years and calling it little names, I know it was Verizon that came up with Oath. That was so funny. They just went, not so much. And so they're merging it with Discovery, which does things like natural history and cooking and lifestyle stuff. And the whole point is that it's like an arms race of subscription video on demand, SVOD for short, where, we've spoken about this for years. I subscribe to Netflix, that's £8 or something, or £9 that keeps going up.
Yeah, it'll be £15 before too long, and we'll all end up dumping on Netflix subscriptions. But
I've got Netflix, I've got Amazon Prime, and obviously you get the expedited delivery on top of that, but that's another £8 or £9. We've got Now TV, so I can get basically the stuff that's owned by AT&T now, the HBO, like Game of Thrones, Sopranos, that sort of thing.
How much is that, by the way?
That's about the same. They're all about £8 or £9.
Wait, you get HBO stuff for £8 a month?
Yeah, something like that.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
Now TV's about £8 a month.
That's not
Yeah.
bad.
And you can subscribe to it just for...
It's probably just the TV rather than the movie.
Yeah, you might, if you get sports and everything, it's probably more than that. But you can dip in and take a package for 2 weeks or 1 week. That's the nice thing about it. It's not like a Sky subscription where you're tied in for 2 years. It's very much on a sort of internet model.
But let's say...
So as in you, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
You can go and watch the entire Game of Thrones catalog,
Yeah.
for
and
example.
then unsubscribe.
That's what I did when it came out, because I wanted to watch the last season. I just got a...
Oh, money well spent.
Yeah.
in the last season.
Well, I got like a... It was over 2 months, I think. Got it for
pretty
2
good.
months and then cancelled it. So,
And we're just more the kind of people they hope, which is that we do it for Game of Thrones and then we hang around.
The Friends reunion.
And
Well,
my missus watches a lot more telly than I do, and she gets value out of it. If I tried to cancel it, it'd be more my...
Well, the one that I subscribed to and then thought about cutting was Disney, because the kids wanted to watch a few of the Avengers films. And
Right.
There were
Star
series,
Wars and shit.
and then we've ended up keeping it because they have sort of released new things like this, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is popular in our house.
Well, so
And-
that plays into the narrative that I was developing. So there's only a certain amount. I'm dropping, let's say, 25, 30 quid a month. How much higher am I willing to go?
yeah.
Am I willing to subscribe to Disney as well? Not so far, I haven't. And am I willing to subscribe to whatever AT&T have got? And this is more me putting my position of an American, put myself in the position of an American, because obviously AT&T is not trying to get my money now. It goes through Now TV. And they seem to have concluded that even the $100 they spent and producing HBO Max, and HBO is probably the best for like TV drama.
Yeah.
I mean, just Sopranos and The Wire alone.
Yeah, that
and
was a long time
Deadwood.
ago.
I think Deadwood's... That was a long time ago. Well, yes. So the brand historically is the best. Whether it's still producing that quality of stuff is another matter. But am I going to drop another tenner on that? And so they seem to have had a think and gone, maybe if we get Discovery involved, we got this long tail. Nothing on Discovery is really going to rock your world.
Yeah.
But what you were saying, this comes back to what you're saying, and I will hand it over to you in a sec because you did write the thing up about how you sign on for Game of Thrones, but you hang around for extreme lumberjacking or something. Maybe that's the thinking, and that's
Swamp people.
yeah, exactly. There's that one like ice truckers and shit like that.
Yeah.
All
Ice
these-
road truckers.
Yeah.
I actually did enjoy that a couple
Yeah,
of
well,
episodes
you
that I
can
watched.
sort of-
It's like, this is so bizarre that people
Yellow
do
Knife
this.
Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, you can just imagine. You're like, just the shit these people get up to. And anyway, that sort of prompted you to write an analytical piece.
Well,
on,
I did
on
a
the
long
whole.
one, on just content moves generally, because the move to spin it out now and merge it with Discovery and all the things you just said, the valid points about how many of these packages can people sign up to, I think is very fair. People can't just carry on spending on. There's only a limited amount of room, isn't there, for these content services?
You'd think.
But to me, it was an admission that they were doing this. That the whole rationale for that takeover in the first place was massively flawed, and it only happened. It's really bloody recent. I think the deal got done in 2018. It was 2016 when they started talking
finally
about
went
it. It had so many regulatory barriers that they had to work on to get this thing through. So God knows what cost that was in terms of money and executives' time and lawyers' fees and all
Disruption,
that. Yeah. Eventually gets done in 2018, and it's now 2021, and they basically admitted that it was a mistake. And
It'll turn out to
how
be
shocking!
bollocks.
I mean, who are these people? Randall Stevenson, was the guy in charge of the company. at the time. He left in his final year. His salary, his basic salary plus everything else that he walked off with in 1 year was 32 million.
Oof.
Right? What they get paid over there in comparison with what European telecom executives get is absolutely outrageous. Yeah. And the share price of AT&T under his stewardship, if you like, has performed really badly. The takeover is not just for. It's not just. Let's remember, it's not just Time Warner. There was the DirecTV takeover that was also
big.
a bit of a disaster
That's about 50 mil, wasn't it?
Their balance sheet's in a terrible state, and this will help because
that's why they've got to do this.
This takes about 43 billion off the balance sheet, but it's still a massive number for an operator that. It didn't have a great year last year. Its revenue sank. I think it might even have reported a loss, and. You're just thinking to yourself, what the hell was this guy thinking? Because if you look back at interviews, and I remember writing about it at the time and thinking, does it really make sense for AT&T to be buying Time Warner?
It was never that obvious.
Well, journalists write articles, and even though these thoughts go through your head, you're always thinking to yourself, is it just me thinking this? And do I need to be careful because I don't know content as well as maybe Randall Stevenson does, and maybe he's onto something. So you're always sort of being.
You see, they got there for a reason.
You don't want to stick your neck out too much. And I look back on some of my original stuff, and I was probably more positive about it than perhaps I should have been. But you look back on it now, and the things he was saying just really didn't make sense, because the whole rationale for the deal was to create a vertically integrated business. To have. So basically, you combine the telecom business with the content business, and by putting those two things together, you get this big advantage.
And there's some virtuous circle of advertising and network effect.
Well,
and all that sort of thing.
That was hard to understand, and it's never very good when it's hard to understand the benefits of a deal. When you have to think about it, how do they do this? That's not a good sign. But the bigger thing, which is about vertical integration, just didn't make sense. The reason it didn't make sense is because this is what telcos were doing in the early 2000s. They were trying to sort of position themselves as walled gardens, if you like. That was the expression that got used. You came to that operator and you could get content through that operator, but if you left the operator, you wouldn't get that content.
And that's all you need, because we'll cover it.
And then the internet firms came along and blew that model to smithereens. And the reason that Netflix is successful is because it doesn't have a distribution network. You can be a subscriber to any broadband network in the world. You can be a subscriber to any mobile operator in the world.
And it's totally cloud. So I can switch from watching Netflix on the telly to my phone to my tablet.
Yeah, and Netflix runs over the top of it. So what advantage do you get? You're going to try and position your HBO offering and all the other stuff that you're getting with WarnerMedia, and only sell it to AT&T people, which would run into competition problems anyway, or try and give them some kind of... It might have
even been a prerequisite of approving the thing that they couldn't do that.
I remember some analysts saying, well, hang on a minute, if that's a prerequisite and regulators are saying that, then kind of what's the point of doing it? It was very hard. Content is, distribution and content are not inseparable anymore. They used to be. There used to be days when you had to get things.
Which is what Ben Thompson was saying in that Stratosphere thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was a good piece. But the whole, you referred to now, and that's a massively, good example of that sort of phenomenon, that you used to have to be a Sky broadband customer, didn't you?
And then they realised that they're missing on a whole bunch of market.
Yeah, and now you can just go to your computer. You don't even have to have a TV. You just go to your computer or your phone and take out a Now TV Pass. You can have it for a few months. You can have it for a week. You can have it for years.
You have to sign
no contracts. And you get Game of Thrones and anything else that you want. And yet somehow this guy who gets 32 million in a single year was convincing himself that we need to be, he said it himself in an interview, we need to be vertically integrated to compete with the Netflixes and Googles of this world.
Why are you competing with them?
Where's the logic there, Well,
why are you competing with them?
And the more laughable, because I wrote about several content deals in the big story I did, the more laughable one even was the Verizon move, actually, which was Lowell McAdam, another grossly overpaid telecom executive who trotted off.
I bet you, what's his name? Vestberg's not doing badly, though.
Well, I think Vestberg looked at this deal and thought, what the hell was this guy thinking? And again, he disappeared into the sunset with his golden parachute. I think 27 million in benefits he got when he left.
Beautiful.
Even Verizon themselves in a SEC filing complained actually about how much they were paying
they complained about
top
themselves.
Executives. Well, it was shareholder pressure that's created the sort of need to reward the executives in that way. But he thought that it was sensible to go and buy an internet company that was in its heyday in 1999 and that's been in decline since 2001. And then
not just one.
Well, I mean, it was 2001 was when it had its big merger, wasn't it, with the AOL and Time Warner? And
Yeah, but you're forgetting about Yahoo.
Well, I'm talking about well, this is the thing. He follows
they bought two
it up 2
shitty
years
ones.
later.
Sorry,
with
was
another
I
crap
stealing your
one.
thunder? All right.
And didn't even change his mind when when all these revelations came to light about accounts being hacked into, and this mess that affected about 1 billion customers. All that did was lower the purchase price by 350
He thought,
million.
great, we got a bargain.
And it's almost like he woke up one morning and just had no memory of the last 16 years and thought he was still living in the late 90s. And you just kind of think, what?
You just wonder what these execs look at. I think they just look at spreadsheets and they go, Yahoo 20 years ago was worth $1 zillion and now we can get it for $1 billion. What a fucking bargain.
Yeah.
Without thinking maybe there's a reason why it's so much cheaper.
And then they had to, I think in 2018, they had to write down the value of that business, which they renamed Oath, which is really odd, by about $4 billion.
Oath with a London accent.
And then there were thousands of layoffs linked with it, of course.
Yes.
They've sacked a lot of people to do with that. He walked off very nicely.
I know, and they've had like AOL, they've had really good websites like TechCrunch have been passed around from pillar to post. What is it? Huffington Post ended up getting bought by BuzzFeed and dicked about there.
Yeah.
It's just a complete car crash. And I feel, I'll always feel kinship with other journalists. I don't owe Huffington Post or TechCrunch or anyone anything. I don't even know anyone who works there, but I know that they are journalists who are probably sitting down every day and putting a decent shift in.
Yep.
Because that's what us hacks do. We do put our back into it when we're writing a story. Perhaps not on a Friday when I'm hurrying to get into the podcast.
But then I suppose the other one was you mentioned it as well, the BT one, which was not quite on the same scale, and we don't really know what their plans are
about
for
the
sport.
BT Sport, but they're paying a lot for that.
Well, there was a perception, I think, under previous leadership. Gavin Patterson was running the business when they decided that they were going to splurge a lot of money on sports rights, and I think if you look at the accounts now, even they're still spending about $1 billion a year. On TV rights overall, and most of that's obviously going to be football.
Yeah,
and
just so that a few early 20-year-olds can buy 10 Ferraris.
It's just never really worked out
the
for
bloody
them.
Socialist in me, this stuff.
It's never really done anything for them. If you look at broadband take up and you look at how much people are spending on their broadband accounts, it's gone down last year. It's less.
So there's no ARPU lift.
There's no ARPU lift, and yet. And then they've been under pressure on the network side. And this was kind of one of the points of my article, actually, was that this going into content in this way and spending billions on these acquisitions that haven't worked out and billions on sports rights has been a massive distraction, actually, from what these companies should have been doing. So in BT's case, and it's maybe not such an issue for BT shareholders as the country as a whole, as it's a sort of telecom incumbent and it's perceived to be under pressure constantly from regulators. There's very much a sense that the UK's quite a long way behind other bits of Europe now on the rollout of full fibre networks. Certainly markets like Spain and Portugal, where you'd never ever have thought 20 years ago that we could be behind them on telecom networks, because we were sort of quite arrogant about we're Northern European and we're better at that kind of thing.
Not like you feckless Mediterranean.
But they almost
types.
have, I think everybody in those markets now has a sort of access to a full fibre network, and we're getting a lot better. It's improving, but and now under new management, under Philip Jansen, there's this scheme to actually up spending on fibre and forget about the
City
content,
Fibre every time they put like one bit of fibre down in some hamlet somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Jansen's doing a good job of that rollout. You have to give them credit. They've hit targets. They've reprioritised. The bigger worry for me is looking at what's gone on really with AT&T and Verizon, because the amount they've spent so much and what they've been doing while they've been jerking around with this content fixation, T-Mobile's just kind of cruised past AT&T and is on its way to overtaking Verizon.
I would say, if you don't mind, I'm going to wrap it up just because we're running out of time. I want to move on to the final thing. Two things. Firstly, Verizon fucked up a lot less than AT&T because the amount they spent on
much
AOL
smaller.
and Yahoo's much less than what AT&T spent on Time Warner.
Yeah.
And secondly, I just think it's the age-old done-pipe paranoia. They're just constantly groping around. The reason these overpaid, clearly clueless execs do this is because time and time again, the narrative for them is, right, we can just sit here, and this sort of feeds into the final segment, we can just sit here and be a utility and be good at providing a data pipe or a communications pipe. and just do that. And it's why I'm really grateful that like Mary, who writes for us, quite likes covering operator quarterlies, because I find them dull as fuck, and I'm just like, go for it, man. Because it's like covering Thames Water's quarterlies.
Yeah,
they're a utility, and so every now and then they go, no, we're not a utility. We've got a special relationship with our customers, and we got to do a better job of utilising it. And as you said, like 10, 20 years ago, they were trying to create this wall garden thing, and we're the pipe, but we should also be what happens at the end of the pipe. It's almost like, if we're going to use the pipe metaphor, it's almost like the water company also trying to determine what you do with the water once it comes out the tap.
Yeah.
And just as in that metaphor, it's not viable.
Yeah.
I don't think it's viable for these people, which is why it keeps failing. But also, the reason they keep rolling the dice is because they can never reconcile themselves to being utilities.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and that came out in a couple of the updates. This is moving into the final section, I guess, of the podcast now.
Do the transition yourself.
Yeah, because if you looked at so Deutsche Telekom had a capital markets day this week, and Vodafone had an earnings report this week. But it was almost capital markets day like, because they talked about long-term forecasts. Capital markets days, the operators tend to sort of talk about their 5-year plan, if you like, or their 4-year plan, where they're going.
Their cunning plan.
Yeah, and the thing that really stunned me is Vodafone said Vodafone's share price did really badly on the day that it had its...
it did. I've got some Vodafone.
Right. It went down 9%, closed down 9% that day on the London Stock Exchange.
They give good dividend.
Yeah, and all they did, that apparently to rattle the markets that much, was basically say, we're going to spend 8 billion in capex this year, compared with 7.9 billion last year. And as a result, free cash flow will be 5 billion instead of a little bit more. And that sent the share price down.
It's weird,
9%.
isn't it?
And I just think there's probably more to it than that. I think, I don't know, but I suspect shareholders look at, because what Nick Reed, who's the CEO, was talking about on the call was very much, investment in new business areas. Now, he's certainly not talking about going and buying content companies. He's certainly not talking about some big media acquisition or anything like that. They're talking about things like, investment in their towers business, for instance, and speeding up 5G rollout, and then putting more money into Vodafone Business, which is the enterprise-focused arm, so that they can meet, kind of SME needs, and that's quite a good opportunity for them. But I think shareholders look at this stuff and they go, well, it's like you just saying it. They all sort of fall under the utility kind of brand, don't they? As sexy as you want to try and make this stuff sound, it never really translates into massive revenue growth for the operators. And Deutsche Telekom did the same thing this week. They came out. They were really credit to Deutsche Telekom. The current management has done a really good job of that business, of managing it well. It's kind of growing in its European markets just about. It's doing really well in the States, where it's obviously.
T-Mobile, yeah.
It's T-Mobile business has been on a roll, and it's recently merged with Sprint, and that merge has probably gone better than I think a lot of people expected.
And as you said, it helps that their main competitors have been dicking about with content.
Exactly.
Oh, there we go. The wall just fell off for those listening.
But the thing is that you go back 20 years, not that far actually. 2008, I remember being on a Deutsche Telekom Capital Markets Day presentation where previous, bosses were talking about billions of euros in new opportunities from IoT and all this kind of stuff. And this time around, what did they say? What's their target for 2024? Compound annual growth rate between now and 2024 of, I think it was 1 to 2%.
Yes.
And now you look at the earnings forecast,
excited.
and it's about 3 to 4, even 3 to 5%, which to me points to, further pruning of the business basically. And there's a lot of fancy talk about software and things like Open RAN and automation. And you look at what's happened to Deutsche Telekom's headcount outside the US market. I think it's gone down by 24,000.
Well, we've been saying this for years, isn't it? The only way they increase profitability
it's just
is by
savings.
cutting costs.
All these fancy things that get mentioned and discussed that lots of bits of the telecom industry get very excited about, like Open RAN and like cloudification and software and being more agile. All it really is cost savings. There's not a great revenue opportunity in any of these areas, I'm afraid. There really isn't.
No, I mean, the agile bit is supposed to be that...
Well, no one's ever been able to explain that in a way that makes
it's supposed to be that you can
compelling.
deliver dynamically more stuff. Like I'm looking at my phone and maybe they're getting data from somewhere and then they send me, maybe they've listened into our conversation and when they know we're going to go to the White Hart and then the Flatiron Square, and then they send me a little voucher or some kind of location specific thing or something very immediate and personalised.
Yeah.
But they've never pulled that off.
They've never pulled it off. And again, to me, it's when they start to talk about it in that way, it's a little bit dodgy anyway, because it's kind of getting into the territory of trying to do the sort of things that the internet companies already do. And the fact of the matter is they're never going to be able to compete against the internet companies.
So it's back to what you were saying about the rationale
Forget
of buying
about
all these things.
You've had it. You know, they had their opportunity and they blew it years ago when the internet companies weren't that big.
Yeah.
And
to be honest, they were never going to beat them.
Probably not,
It's just not
because they
their
just
core
don't have the
competence.
mindset, you know, and they're regulated too heavily. And there's all sorts of other factors.
As we know, there are even the biggest companies have a certain core competence.
Yeah.
And if they try and venture from that core competence, it's not that you can't intellectually get your head round it. It's just that all your processes, all your internal culture, all your momentum is pointing in a certain direction. And then someone goes, right, let's do all this. You go, yeah, that's fine. We'll just redirect our efforts. But it's not as simple as that.
No. But here's the other depressing thing about, you know, the DT forecast in particular, which markets reacted to quite well, by the way. I think their share price is up about 2%.
Vodafone's like, oh, hello.
Yeah, because I think, they did some interesting things. Obviously, their spending priorities are in the US. If you look at where the CapEx is going, most of it's going to be spent in the US market.
Which seems to be returning.
And they're still spending heavily in Europe, but it's down a bit on what they'd done previously. You know, they've got these forecasts that are, you know, pretty good actually on the profit level and so on the revenue forecast level, and the reaction was the share price goes up 2%. So investors are reacting. They're not gleeful, but they're not like this is rubbish. But the slightly sad thing about it is by 2024, 5G will be, in Deutsche Telekom's case, about 5 years old. So it will be well through its...
And they're still only projecting
its development scale. And
growth.
They're still projected. This is a technology that everybody was saying is going to open up all these enterprise opportunities, you know. And
we were always sceptical, by the way.
And it's going to do all this stuff. And by the time it's 5 years old, by the time it's 2024, how much talk is there about 6G at the moment? Quite a lot. By 2024, people will be planning for that by 28,
or 5G
29.
advanced.
Yeah, or 5G, which is probably going to be an early version of 6G or something. And to be at the 5-year stage, you know, in its cycle, what's the normal? How long does a generation of technology last? We normally reckon a decade.
Yeah.
So it's halfway through. Then it's middle-aged, and it's done 1 to 2% headline growth after all the billions spent on spectrum licenses, all the network investment,
all the hype.
Know, I mean, I don't know what the return on capital employed is like, because that is in Deutsche Telekom's paperwork as well. But if you just broke that out for 5G alone and looked at a metric like that, I don't know. It just the business case to me just doesn't sound very good. And they will obviously say it's more about efficiency, and if we didn't do this, we'd be in a dreadful state and we wouldn't be able to compete. So I can see why they've had to do it, but it's not really an uplifting story, is it, for shareholders?
So to wrap it up, because we're running out of time, I think maybe one of the reasons Vodafone shares went down by as much as they did, it was like 5, 6, 7%.
I think at the end of the day it was 9, and then it went down another 2% the next day. I think it might have recovered since then. But
they better pay me a good dividend next time. Is, you know, not just, as you say, the 100 million of extra capex or whatever that they said. It's just this, what you were just describing, this realignment of expectations.
Yeah.
And maybe investors are going, oh shit, it's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah.
We're not going to get this 5G windfall, and maybe that's where the adjustment in the share price went. All right, man, we're going to wrap it up there because we've got stuff to do, innit? So thanks a lot for listening, and make sure you join us for the next one.